Hello and welcome, I'm Kayla the Scrivener, and today we're going to be going over the goals I made in January. Surprise, surprise, I don't think I've ever successfully done this. I've always made goals and then done terrible at ever actually talking about them or doing them. So this year I'm actually doing pretty good, and let's talk about them. So the first one that I made was read 20 Canadian books, and I made this because I wanted to read more Canadian books and I wanted to read more. Like, I read Albatross in 2020 and it had just sparked a love that I barely ever saw myself represented in country-wise and in location and all of these things and experiences that are very unique, and I really loved it. So in the later half of 2020 I read some books and I loved it, and then I've read 19 out of the 20 that I had planned, so I really enjoyed this. Vivek Shreya is definitely like a highlight of this, just so wonderful. I read Policing Black Lives, which goes over police brutality and especially governmental brutality and how it's not just the police but like different organizations within the government that help control and discriminate against Black people and Indigenous people, and it does do a little bit on other minorities. I also wanted to read some memoirs by Native Canadians, and the one that I loved the most was by Billy Ray Belcourt, and this is A History of My Brief Body, that just looks at the intersections of his ingenuity and his sexuality and living in rural Canada and his writing and all of that, and it was just so beautiful and well done and evocative. My next one was I wanted to read 30 classic books. Classics I think are my favorite genre. I really enjoy them, and it's not even a genre because they're so widespreading, but I just love being able to analyze and look at the history of books, and I really enjoyed doing this. So I read 15 so far, and I definitely need to remind myself to read more because they often get pushed to the background, but I absolutely love them whenever I pick them up. Next, we have to read 10 horror books, and I actually successfully did this, and some with great success, and some with middling success, and some with I hate body horror failure. I've been really falling in love with short stories ever since I read The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson, and I wanted to prioritize reading them, and I've read 7 so far, and that made me very happy. It's the amount that I had set, and the favorite one of this was The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, and this was by Nisha Pillay, and it was so evocative and wonderful and well written. I really recommend it to everyone. It really takes a look at a lot of Black women who are in the church or families are associated with the church and what it looks like and the secrets they hold and the love they have. The next one was much more of a guideline than a goal, but this was to make sure that I was reading at least 40% of authors of color, and I just want to make sure, especially with reading classics and reading comics, that I wasn't overlooking in my more modern reading and even in my more older reading the diversity of voices as we sit in quarantine and as we become more awakened to the travesties of the past and present. I think that it's so important to make sure that it's not just my voice that I'm hearing. So I'm doing okay in this, not as great as I necessarily wanted to. It's about a 60-40 cut, so about 60% POC authors and about 40% white authors. I've read a fair amount of Black and Asian authors, but I really want to make sure that I'm reading more Latinx and more Indigenous authors. As a Canadian, I really want to make sure that I'm reading more Indigenous and Native literature, and I really haven't done that this year. I've only read 4, and I know that they aren't as popular, but that shouldn't be an excuse to not seek them out. The next one is also kind of a guideline, and this is just to read more unknown books, and also kind of connected, I want to read less American-centric books. So for unknown books is actually one that I discovered, which was super cool when I did the Asian readathon, and the book that I really want to highlight in this is Spring Essence, and this is by Ho Jan Hoan, and she was a concubine, and she published a collection of poetry in 1801 called Spring Essence, and I was so surprised by this. It is honest and open and like very sexy, which I was not expecting, like the sexualization, and she also talks about like the fact that, you know, the idea of sharing her husband, and is very open about feminist ideals and all of these things, and I really enjoy them, and maybe I'll be able to track down more of her poetry, but these were, I think, most of her poetry that they have recovered. For less American books, I have been doing alright in this. I've read 7 translated books, some French, some Norwegian, some Japanese and Vietnamese books, and yeah, it's definitely not as high as I would like it, but I definitely am reading more outside of my comfort zone than I have before, so I'm happy about that. And one book that I really want to talk about that I absolutely love, that isn't translated but it is sent in contemporary Ghana, and this is His Only Wife, and it is such a great book. I really loved it. It follows this girl who is Afi, and she's 21 years old, and she is made to marry this man because her family is really dependent. Her father is dead and her mother is working for the woman who is the auntie of the village, and she decides that Afi is the perfect bride to get her son on board again, and she has to really act like a docile and submissive wife and really get rid of a lot of her personality in order to hopefully please this so that her mother remains in a living situation that is sustainable. and it is really about her coming of age and finding herself. And I really love that the author never actually, you know, really denounces the sexism, but lets the story show for itself and really lets them to be human. I was surprised how much I loved the husband that isn't necessarily a good man, but is very charming. And I don't really want to say a whole lot about the story because I was guessing until the right end. But these are my goals and some of the books that I read because of these goals and that I really, really enjoyed. And let me know how your goals have been going for 2020. Have you adapted or changed any of your goals? And I will see you next time. Bye.